this video, we are going to look at the functional divisions. The functional divisions of the cerebellum. So to start off with the questions. So the first question is, what are the functions of the dorsal spinocerebellum? This will be our first question. The second question is, what is the function of the ventral spinocerebellum? And the third question we want to ask is, what is the function of the vestibulocerebellum? Function of the vestibulocerebellum, that is the flocculonodular lobe. So we'll find out the answers to all these questions in this video, and in the end of the video there are some bonus questions as well. So first, before we start, we need to know the diagram of the cerebellum so that it's easier to understand. So here, this is nothing but the vermis. Then comes the side structures. So the structure to the side, this is nothing but the medial part. The medial part of the cerebellar hemisphere. So both of them combined, it forms the spinocerebellum. The spinocerebellum. So it is also known as the paleocerebellum. Paleocerebellum. Then we move on to the lateral part of the cerebellar hemisphere. So this is nothing but the lateral part of the cerebellar hemisphere. And then comes, this is nothing but, it all is under the cerebrocerebellum. Cerebrocerebellum, that is nothing but the neocerebellum. Next comes the nodule of vermis. So this is the structure in the end. This is the nodule of vermis. And then this is nothing but the flocculus. So both of them, they combinedly form the vestibulocerebellum. Vestibulocerebellum, that is nothing but the archicerebellum. Now this image has to be in our mind as we progress. So now we are going to talk about the dorsal spinocerebellum. Dorsal spinocerebellum. So the dorsal spinocerebellum, first we need to know the constituents. So constituents, it constitutes the vermis. So there is a vermis and except the nucleus. Then we move on to the afferent. Afferent is nothing but the input. So this includes the somatosensory, and this is from trunk. From trunk, the visual, auditory, as well as the vestibular. Then we move on to the efferent. Efferent is also known as the output. So this includes this is where the fastigial nucleus to the medial descending system. descending system. Now, what are the functions of this dorsospinal cerebellum? The function is that it maintains maintenance of the posture is done, and also it helps in the execution. It helps in the execution of the gross movements. Next, there is also another function that it controls. What does it control? The the interplay. This is between the agonist as well as the antagonist group of muscles. Group of muscles. Then we move on to the ventral spinocerebellum. So what is this ventral spinocerebellum? So the constituents is that it constitutes the adjacent. It constitutes the adjacent medial portion. This is of the hemisphere. Next, what about the afferent? Afferent is nothing but the input. What about the afferent? So it includes the somatosensory input. This is from the limbs. Somatosensory input. This is from the limbs. And what about the afferent? The afferent, if you see, is nothing but the output. So this will be from via the interposed nucleus to the lateral corticospinal and the rubrospinal system. The corticospinal and the rubrospinal systems. Next we move on to what are the functions of this? Question is, what are the functions of the ventrospinocerebellar? The function is that it controls the distal muscles. It controls the distal muscles, and this is of the limbs. Controls the distal muscles of the limbs, and this is nothing but it results in it smoothens and also coordinates. It smoothens and coordinates the movements. Then we move on to the cerebrocerebellum. What is the cerebrocerebellum? That is nothing but the neocerebellum. So first we are going to look at the constituents. So what does it constitute? There is the lateral portion. The lateral portion of the hemispheres. Next, there is the input. So the input is that from the cerebral motor cortex as well as premotor and the somatosensory cortex. Next we are looking at the output. So in case of the output, it is from the dentate nucleus. The dentate nucleus to motor, premotor as well as the prefrontal cortex. So what is the role of the function of the cerebrocerebellum? The function is that it helps in planning of the sequence of voluntary movements. So it helps in the planning of the sequence of voluntary movements. Next we move on to the vestibulocerebellum. So vestibulocerebellum is nothing but the flocculonodular lobe. So here, what are the constituents? Constituents of the vestibulocerebellum includes the nodules. So there are nodules as well as the floccules. So what is the input of this? The input is that there is the vestibular input and there is also the visual input and the somatosensory from the neck. Then the question is, what is the output of the vestibulocerebellum? So the output, it includes, it is to the vestibular nuclei. So vestibular nuclei, and this is in brainstem. And that is direct projection. So what is the function of the vestibulocerebellum? The function is that it participates. It participates in maintaining. It participates in maintaining the equilibrium and also the posture. Next, it also controls. It controls the ocular movements. Then what it does, it also is responsible for regulating the stability. It also regulates the stability of the head, the body in space. So next, we'll be answering all our questions. So the first question we asked was, in terms of the dorsospinocerebellum, what is the function? This was the question. So the function is nothing but it maintains the posture. It maintains the posture, helps in the execution of the gross movements. Then it also controls. It controls the interplay. So the interplay is between the agonist and the antagonist. Controls the interplay between the agonist and the antagonist group of muscles. The next question we asked was, in case of the ventral spinocerebellum, in case of the ventral spinocerebellum, what is the function? So here what we saw is there is control of the distal muscles. The control of the distal muscles, and this is of the limb. And what this does is there is a smoothens and coordinates the movements. It smoothens as well as coordinates the movements. Then now we move ahead with the next question. The third question we asked was, what is the function of, third question was, what is the function of the vestibulocerebellum? So that is the flocculonodular lobe. So the answer here is that the vestibular cerebellum, it is involved in the Firstly, it participates. It participates in maintaining the equilibrium. Firstly, it participates in maintaining the equilibrium as well as the maintaining of the posture. The second thing is that it controls. It controls the ocular. It controls the ocular movements. The third thing is that the vestibular cerebellum, it helps in responsible. It is responsible to regulate the stability. So it helps in regulating the stability of the head, and the body. This is in space. So now we are going to look at some bonus questions. So here what we want to ask is, you can answer them in the comments. The first question we want to ask is, what is the function of the cerebellum? What is the function of this? Next question is, what is the afferent and efferent of the dorsal spinocerebellum? The last question would be, what are the constituents? What are the constituents of the ventral spinocerebellum? So you can answer these questions in the comments.